Welcome to the Space in Between podcast, a series where we will talk about everything and anything mental performance in a bite-sized fashion.
My name is Sienna and I'm here with Frida as per usual. We are both certified mental performance consultants from Ireland and Sweden. On this podcast, we share our knowledge and passion for all things sport and performance psychology. This includes all things mindset, exercise, sport, everyday life, and insights into how we help ourselves and others with developing our mindset. Today we're going to get stuck into a competition week mindset. The reason for that is we're keeping this podcast relevant to what's going on in our lives. I am going to compete in the first 40x20 tournament of the season. But before we get into that, what are we going to discuss first, Frida?
We're just going to let you know what we got going on at the moment.
Yeah.
Just a little quickie, nothing too crazy. But if you haven't noticed, our social media is popping at the moment. And specifically, we have been very consistent with uploading our podcast, but also our YouTube channel. That's really where I want you to take your focus and head over. We have a good few videos up there now, especially a new series called A Stretch for the Mind that Sienna is leading. It's a brilliant series and I highly recommend it, talking about sports psychology topics while you are stretching. What else could you want?
I know,
Nothing.
It's a dream.
And we have a lot of other fun things coming up on the YouTube as well. And then also, in case you didn't know, we work with athletes, we work with schools, we work with businesses, group settings, individual workshops, all of it. So, we are your high performance hub. Reach out to us if you want to elevate your game.
Nice. Well done, Frida.
That came out of, it was natural.
Wow.
Salesperson. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's get back to today's topic.
All right. So we have competition week mentality.
That's the one.
And competition week is a very exciting week.
It is.
Hopefully. Along with it can come some challenges.
Yeah.
Before we get into the challenges, some things that just like tick the box, guys, on competition week, okay? We want to control the controllables, essentially. That's what we talk about in performance, but it's also what we talk about in preparation. So we're talking about like the 3 to 5 days before a competition. Most of the work is done.
Yep.
Whether it is done or not, it is done. Not much is changing physically between, for example, for me, today is Monday and
Friday.
I'll play on Friday. Like not much is going to change, but small things can impact how you feel on that day. So the things that we're thinking about taking care of before we even get into the mindset side of things is like nutrition. We're fueling well. Recovery. We're not going smashing the body in the gym this week. We're not going playing 5 games of handball. Okay? If you feel you have to do that, something's gone wrong. So we're tapering. We're pulling back and sleep. This week, above all, get your sleep, okay? Just making sure we're getting a nice, good night's sleep for recovery. And I know I said that these things don't, we'll talk about this before we get into mindset, but on a personal level, but also if we think about preparation being one of the things that really builds confidence, like taking care of these things that seem kind of simple, they can actually allow you to go into your performance, your competition at the weekend, feeling slightly more confident, feeling slightly more prepared. And it's only a few days before the event. So we can gain a lot by doing these things that seem unrelated to mindset.
Yeah. But it's not true that it's unrelated if you think about it, right? If we are going into something recovered, the body is feeling good, we have slept well, that also means that cognitively your mind is going to be sharper.
Yeah, true.
And that's going to help you on game day, especially as we get more fatigued, make better decisions. When we make better decisions, we play better. When we play better, we feel better.
Yeah.
It all goes hand in hand.
So I think if we talk about sleep, for example, that can be one that's actually difficult for people the closer the event comes, because like some people actually might struggle with sleep the night before or even during.
Because of nerves?
And maybe like during you're sore and it's harder to get to sleep. So let's say that you're someone who, if you're competing on Saturday, right, Friday is probably not going to be my best night's sleep. Right, well, let's make sure that the 5 days before that is a solid night's sleep so that, even if it is less than our optimal, like 8 to 9 hours, we can take confidence from, like, that's okay. One night's sleep isn't going to, like, make or break my performance. I've been sleeping well up until this point. So they really, I lied at the start. They really do impact mindset.
But I think instead of praising in that way, we might not think about it.
Yes.
But everything impacts everything, really.
Yeah.
So it is a really important part. And I guess even with the preparation in that way, like also not trying to do things differently from what we usually do. Stick to your routine and have that comfort of following your routine.
Yeah. Things don't have to be perfect. And even accepting that is a part of game week or competition week mentality. It's like, for a lot of people listening to this, probably not like professional athletes who every moment of your day is optimized for performance. But, a lot of people, especially in the GAA sports, like jobs, families, a lot of things going on, which means, no, we're not going to optimize every single % of the day. So even if these things aren't perfect in the lead up to your competition, like that's also okay. We want to control the controllables to the best of our ability and be okay if things don't go exactly how we planned.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember. We're not professional athletes that sleep, train, and compete, and that's what our day revolves around. We all are normal people with normal lives, most of us anyway. So having that, self-compassion and acceptance that that's okay.
Absolutely. But if we think more like in the direct line of mindset, one thing that comes to mind, first of all, when people ask, what should I think about on the week or the lead up to an event is, if you don't, because some people will be like, I actually don't really think about it until like the day before. And that's fine. Like, we don't have to make ourselves try to start visualizing or mentally preparing like today if the event is in 5 days. At this point, we nearly want to be like able to take confidence from, I've been doing my prep. I've been thinking about this indirectly for a while because I've been preparing. So we don't have to like take time out of our day and dedicate it to thinking about it,
100%.
So what we're going to talk about now is kind of like, if we do think about it, if it comes into our mind, what can we do? It's not like we are telling everyone, right, guys, today you need to sit down and start thinking about every single thing that could happen this weekend.
And I think maybe something that would be common for most people to experience in the lead up to an event. And this can differ depending on maybe how confident or nervous we feel. We might experience nerves earlier or later in the week, or maybe it's a combination throughout the whole week.
Like maybe it comes and goes throughout the week when it pops into your head.
Yeah, and I think the first thing to remember there is, one, that's okay. That's normal. We will experience these things because you are going to go into this weekend and do something that you care about. Mm-hmm. So that means that you are going to have thoughts of doubts and what ifs and the things that maybe does not make us feel great all the time.
Yeah. And that's
completely normal.
That's what we're going to talk about, is like those things are so normal. And that's why we're talking about like nerves and doubt, because they often will arise in the lead up to an event. And even during, if it's a 3-day event, you're going to compete or perform multiple times.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just feel nervous before the first one. So we can do some things that help manage that and handle that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the first thing we want to talk about with this specifically, and the doubts that we might feel, is, what if thoughts. All of those doubts that might pop up into our head. So a very powerful tool that we can use is contingency planning, and more specifically a structure of, if X happens, then I will. We think about the scenario that could happen, and then we come up with a plan on how we're going to respond to that. Because that's where we can regain that power. First, accepting that, okay, we have these thoughts, and now if these thoughts happen, or we're worried about certain things, now we can take control by planning how we're going to respond to them.
And this is something that we would actually write down.
Yeah.
Like, first
Definitely
of all, identify what are the doubts. Like, write them all down. Like, what makes you feel like really nervous? And what are the doubts that pop into your head? Like, maybe it's a few days out, maybe it's the day before.
Yeah.
Because then we can work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we write them down, that's when we can use the contingency planning. And we're going to talk through some examples here for once we've actually prepared our examples.
So I'm just going to share the doubts first that we might just put down on paper. We have 4 examples. Some common ones that we hear with athletes that we're working with is, what if I'm not ready? What if I start poorly? What if I feel really nervous? What if I'm down by a lot? So those are 4, very common things that we might experience. So then the next step is using that structure. If X, then I will X. So let's go through each one of them.
All right. So first we have, if I doubt that I'm ready, then I will remember the work that I have done.
And why is that helpful?
So preparation is one of the main sources of confidence. So by reminding ourselves of the work we have done, whether that's like strength and conditioning, in court, maybe nutrition, sleep, all those things, then we can actually just answer that question. What if I'm not ready? Well, here's all the evidence that you actually are. You know?
Exactly. So we're supporting that claim. Because something that we didn't mention beforehand is that not all thoughts are true.
Yeah.
But we might still think them, but that might not necessarily mean that it's true what we're thinking. And so that's why this can be really powerful. And using the past is a great tool to build confidence. Okay, the next one. What if I start poorly? If I start poorly, then I will take a deep breath and focus on the next ball.
Why would you do that?
Well, the main thing with this is that just because we start poorly, one, doesn't mean that we can't perform well after that. And secondly, it's actually quite a common thought that people are like, oh, if I mess up the first ball, then everything is gone.
Yeah.
But that's very silly, right? It's like we talked about before. You trip and then you just fall on the ground. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Right? So by saying, I will take a deep breath and focus on the next ball, we're bringing our mind to the present.
Yeah.
Because one, we are grounding ourselves with that breath. And two, we're thinking about the next important thing, which is the next ball.
Yeah. And I also think about having that thought. Let's say I have that thought today, Monday. I'm actually just planning in my head, okay, that actually could happen, but this is how I'll respond. So it's okay.
Yeah.
You know? And with these, you'll notice we're not trying to convince ourselves nothing will go wrong. Everything is perfect. It's just like facts, you know? We're just answering these thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. Third, we have, what if I feel really nervous? And then we respond, if I feel really nervous, then I will remind myself that nerves are normal and I can use this energy to perform.
And why is that helpful?
This one is helpful. Firstly, normalizing the nerves. Something I think about is when I'm nervous, my opponent is nervous too. Everybody's nervous before they go into play. So we're all like having to handle that in our own way. Then the second part of that is I can use this energy to perform. Is usually when I'm nervous, it's something that I actually have been anticipating and looking forward to for a while. And excitement and nerves can bring up the same physical response a lot of the time, like butterflies or like sweaty hands, stuff like that. So I just like to remind myself that nerves and excitement can exist at the same time. And we're also not saying I'll do this thing to get rid of nerves, because that can be really hard, virtually impossible to completely get rid of nerves. So again, we're just being honest with ourselves.
Yeah,
with
performing
what we can do.
with the nerves. So yeah, that's a big one, definitely. And you know, there's so many ways we can answer this. So like you might say something else here. You know, maybe you're like, I'm going to do box breathing because that helps me calm down.
Yeah. I mean, one that I've done before, because I've written this one down before, is like, what if I feel so nervous that I like struggle to perform?
Yeah.
And then I've answered that with, I will remind myself that I have performed while nervous before.
Yeah.
You know, because every single game I play, I'm nervous, you know, so it's not like a new thing, but every time it just feels new, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, a massive one is definitely normalizing it. We come back to that a lot.
Yeah.
Normalizing and accepting and knowing that we can perform anyway. Last one. What if wow. Last one. What if I am down by a lot? And we're talking about points here. So if I'm trailing by a lot, then I will take a timeout to recompose myself. And that response is very specific to handball, right? Because
that's true.
Not a lot of sports you'll be able to take a timeout, unfortunately, even if we want to. Soccer head over here. But yeah, why is this one good? You're the handball head. Off you go.
Well, I mean, the timeouts are there for a reason, you know?
That's true.
One of the primary reasons a lot of people will use a timeout is for this. The opponent maybe has a bit of momentum.
Yeah.
So the timeout can naturally just break that. You maybe cut into their focus and give yourself a moment to refocus. And depending on why things are going a certain way, then often I'll just use my timeout to just take a moment. Let's all relax, you know? Let's all just stay steady. We're still in this to some degree, even if we're down by several points. Because sometimes it can feel thick and fast when things aren't going your way.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do feel like in sport, a lot of these are maybe trick questions too, because like it comes back to then what do you do during that timeout? And a lot of the time it will be like take some deep breaths and focus on what you're going to do with the next ball.
It's true.
Which we've said already, but giving ourselves an extra moment to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like you said, especially in handball, I think, but any sport can apply to any sport, that when momentum hits, it can feel like it's going really fast. So we want to break that momentum, right? So a timeout in handball would be a very effective tool to doing that. And then giving ourselves the time to, like you said, take that deep breath and also remind ourselves that if they can score 5 points in a row, so can I. Like, that's how fast it can change in a game. So taking control back a little bit in that way.
I just thought of a really random thought, but I think would be interesting is to do like a study on the numbers behind statistically, like whoever takes the time out, how often do they win the next rally?
You know what? We'll do this. We'll do a case study this handball season here now, and I'm going to keep notes of this for every person you play.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because like I think about it on the two ends, like the person who takes the time out obviously feels that they need a moment. So then it's like, okay, that person is using their time out for that reason. But the person on the opposing side, like, you know, it might be just like, keep doing what you're doing. But like, maybe it's not as intense, like the, you know, desire to change. But I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas there.
Don't you just wish you could grab a little microphone and go down to the players and ask? Imagine. That actually would be kind of cool, but also not possible.
Anyways. Yeah. Back to game competition week mentality.
Yeah. So I suppose kind of wrapping up the if then I will segment here. Why is this helpful?
So this is helpful because a lot of the time these doubts, and sometimes we might feel like it's even a bizarre doubt to have, like, you know, we might be like the most unhinged thing that we think about that could potentially go wrong. They exist in our mind. And then, you know, these negative thoughts often can kind of turn into a cycle of like even imagining that happening, like imagining myself starting poorly, imagining myself making mistakes, imagining myself like feeling so nervous that I can't play well. When we write them down, we let them out. First of all, we can see them on paper and we can actually rationalize like, okay, that actually could happen. And now I can decide how I will respond. So it's like planning the same way, you know, we train the physical side because we want to be prepared for every potential scenario that could happen, every shot that you might have to hit. And it's the same mentally. It's like preparing for everything that could happen, even if it's a small percentage chance that that thing could happen. We just want to prepare for it because then we can take confidence from, okay, even if I do start poorly, like that's okay because I actually have a plan for how I'll respond in that moment compared to your opponent who's like, oh, what if I start poorly? Sure, we'll deal with that when we come to it, you know? Yeah. So now you are in the best position to be able to actually handle that situation.
Because you have it in your back pocket. And this reminds me of, and I love to bring this up whenever we talk about contingency planning. You know exactly what I'm going to say because you're laughing. Yeah. Michael Phelps, brilliant athlete. Of course, if you know who is, big swimmer. And he talks about contingency planning when he has talked about what he has done, specifically visualizing. So he would visualize any possible scenario that could happen. And then he would, you know, think about and seeing himself overcoming those obstacles or whatever it is. So anything that could happen, like when he won his Olympic medal, when his goggles was filled up with water, I think it was during the butterfly, I can't remember. And he was like, I knew exactly what to do because I had imagined that exact scenario and I just counted my strokes. He broke the world record, couldn't even see, and he won the gold. Like, come on.
I know.
If you want to be like Michael Phelps,
anything that shows us that being able to see was a distraction and what he actually needed to do was to go internally and focus on strokes.
That's it. Yeah. No, that's good. But yeah, it's a brilliant tool that we can use to our advantage. So why wouldn't we?
But we're actually not going to release this episode until after my event because I don't want my competitors to steal these tactics.
That's actually very true. Okay, coming out in 1 week. No, I'm joking. So to wrap up our little segment today, what would be like a space in between challenge for this week?
I mean, I think the obvious thing is to use this going into your next performance.
Easy.
Like maybe a couple of days before or like whenever you have these thoughts.
Yeah.
If X, then I will.
Yeah. So write down your doubts.
For it.
Yeah. Write down your doubts and then answer them and smash this weekend.
And most importantly, keep using
the space in between.